Oh, welcome to this edition of the YAHOWAH blog. I am your host, Craig Winn. We get to celebrate it in our ocean studio today. It is a Friday afternoon here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I think today is the 5th of December. You know, time kind of mellows to the point where it's difficult to know exactly where we are on the calendar. It's is beautiful. I hope you enjoy the scenes of the ocean that will be presented throughout this program behind me. We have Rich at the controls, and I am certain that he will find a way to share this beautiful scene with you. Uh, our study today is based upon a Mizmowr that we began just in our last program. We had begun to discuss the opening of the sixth Mizmowr or Psalm of Dowd. It was interesting because it was a celebration of the eighth octave. And the fact of the matter is that on a piano, there are seven keys, and um, an eighth octave would be well beyond human capacity to both hear, of course, also to sing, and even beyond instruments to play. But it is not beyond where we are headed, because while God's plan is delineated in 6 plus 1 equals 7. In other words, it took us 6,000 years after we were booted out of the Gan Eden for us to be able to return, uh, but principally because, well, we didn't measure up in the garden. The fact is that neither Adam nor Towrah was worth a hoot. Neither of them listened to God. Neither of them responded appropriately to Yahweh. Neither of them engaged and contributed anything to the garden, so they didn't want to work, and they certainly showed themselves to be unreliable. And God knew that it was going to take a long time for us to figure our way back, for us to earn his trust, for us to show that we were willing to make a contribution and therefore be additive as opposed to simply being a dependent, and as well show that we can get up when we fall down, show that we're willing and able to learn. And it was all a marvelous story, and we shared the sentiments of this throughout the programs that we're doing in the library studio on our return to the garden. And in this light, one of the things I want to share is that while Adam depicted everything that God does not like, he didn't listen, he was not responsive, he didn't engage and work and made no contribution of any kind, and he proved himself to be unreliable as well as uninteresting. He had no character. Dowd is the opposite of these things. Dowd is the man who worked more diligently with Yahweh than any other. He is the man that not only drew Israel together as a nation, brought them into Jerusalem as the capital, acquired the Temple Mount, but successfully defended God's people. He wrote between Mizmowr and Mashal, Proverbs and Psalms, 100. He was prolific and in terms of his study of the Torah, as well as his literature exclaiming it. And beyond this defense of Israel, the unification of Israel, the building the city of Dowd and Jerusalem, acquiring the Temple Mount, and writing these legendary examples of poetry and prose. Dowd also volunteered to serve as the Passover lamb and take our guilt into Sheol on Matzah and be the living embodiment of Bikuwrym. And so Dowd is the antidote for the failures of Adam. He is the proof text that man, having fallen, can get back up. No one was better at stubbing their toe and then figuring out that, well, there is more to do. We need to get back up, dust ourselves off, and go again. And no one was better at this than Dowd. It was why that whole series that we did that led to 2 Samuel 6, where Dowd gave up on moving the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem when God's metaphor of the bull pulling the Ark of the Covenant position in the proper place was misunderstood by Dowd. And then he had Obed-Edom fill in, and Dowd figured out, if God's going to arrange Obed-Edom to resolve this for me, I might as well just celebrate. I'm going to put on the regalia of the high priest. I'm going to party hardy, and we're going to enjoy this whole process. Dowd was resilient. He was willing to get up and to do this. And even when you consider how kind of at a low point Dowd's first life ended, the highest point any life has ever lived to acclaim is his fulfillment of Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah. And of course, for having done so and having earned God's respect, he's going to return as king of forevermore. So Dowd is the antidote. He is the exemplar. He's not only the exemplar of the covenant, which is what YAHOWAH said in the 89th Mizmowr, he is also the one who facilitated the benefits of the covenant, another thing that God exclaimed of Dowd in the 89th Mizmowr. Dowd made the covenant possible because he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikuwrym. And so there just is no one that is better than Dowd. And one of the things that makes Dowd so much of an ideal exemplar for us is the realization he was often wrong. He didn't always get it right. He stubbed his toe. He tripped. He fell. He was human. He just was extraordinary as a human. He got back up every time. He learned his lesson. He studied more and grew as a result. He corrected what he had wrong. And all the while he remained devoted to YAHOWAH, knew God's name, proclaimed YAHOWAH's name, knew his role in the fulfillment of Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym, which is why he wrote the 22nd and 88th Mizmowrs. Dowd is the man. He is absolutely extraordinary. When it comes to knowing God and engaging in a relationship with him, the only thing that could even possibly rival getting his name right, YAHOWAH, recognizing that God is one, and therefore he cannot be Jesus, he cannot be a Holy Spirit, he cannot be Allah, he cannot be Mama God. He is one. He is not Hashem. He is YAHOWAH. The only thing that would even come close to rivaling those realizations is that YAHOWAH has a chosen one. He has an anointed Messiah. He has his choice of our king. He has a man that he said, he is my son and I am his father. He's the one who YAHOWAH in the 89th Mizmowr said, everything that's important to you, your life, the fulfillment of enablement of the covenant, very model of the covenant, it all revolves around Dowd. He is the one who was the first to demonstrate that we could measure up. I mean, yes, there are some wonderful examples along the way of kind of people who tease at this. I think the story of Noah and the fact that he listened to God, did as God said, and therefore he and his family were spared, along with the life forms around the area of the Black Sea from the tsunami that was caused by the Berkel impact crater. I think that he's a marvelous exemplar, if you will. I think the fact that Abraham and Sarah, by having walked away from Babylon and having listened to God's narrative on the covenant, and then shown that when Abraham and Yishak climbed to Mount Moriah as the dress rehearsal for Passover, that they understood the concept that God was trying to convey, I think is another marvelous exemplar. But it really all comes together. That's why he is the fulcrum. He is the cornerstone. That's why his life was lived right in the middle of the human story, 3,000 years after we were expelled from the garden, and 3,000 years before we will return to the garden. So, And everything I could tell you, there really is nothing more important than you recognizing that Yahweh is God's name. Yahweh is one. That is his one and only name. He is known through his Torah and prophets and nowhere else. And that Dowd is his chosen one, his beloved son, through whom all of these things are now possible to us. So this sentiment regarding the eighth octave is important because while 6 plus 1 is God's formula, we have 6 Moed Mikre that lead to the result, Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym, and then Shabuah, Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. And while that's the cornerstone of the formula that God uses, that's not the end of the story. There is an octave beyond that, the eighth octave, because we will spend year 6,000 to year 7,000 demonstrating that given the opportunity to return to the garden, which God's going to facilitate, and a access to the tree of knowledge, which is the whole purpose of the Towrah, that God's people can be equipped such that they prove themselves worthy of being released from the enclosure, the protective enclosure that's conducive to life of planet Earth, and that we will be free to travel with Yahweh throughout the universe. But for that, we have to prove ourselves interesting. We have to prove that we're willing to listen, to respond, to learn, to grow, to understand, to appreciate who he is and what he has achieved, and to demonstrate we're willing to engage and engage in what matters to him, consistent with everything he has shared. We have 1,000 years to prepare people for that, and it leads us to year 8,000, and that is when this mortal remnant is ultimately going to be given their wings, and we will all be able to be released into the universe to explore every dimension with God, because he will know that he can enjoy our company and that we will grow in his presence and that he can trust us. That's an extraordinary set of circumstances. So the purpose of the Bereth covenant and of the Torah guidance is presented as yakak, as pervasively demonstrated and proven, persuasive in the evidence that God provides for it through Dowd. And it's all through Dowd. He is the centerpiece of this entire story. You know, I was reading today of the, there's this cult of mother goddesses that their entire modus operandi this day, the only thing they've got going for them is to play off my name, to hashtag my name and YadaYahowah, of which, Yahweh has used for the past 24 years and taught, developed, worked through, and offered the benefits of the 35 books at YadaYahowah.com and now the Yahweh blog. And their only thing that they can do, that they do publicly, is to hashtag my name and hashtag YadaYahowah, hashtag even Yahweh, which is the proper pronunciation that I introduced of Yahweh's name, to disparage me, everyone who is associated with me, which would be all of you who are listening, and also Dowd. They have gone full in on disclaiming Dowd as the Messiah, the Son of God, or the Savior who fulfilled Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym. But of course, by saying that, then you invoke the 8th Mizmowr, where Yahweh said, if everything that I have said about Dowd doesn't turn out to be true, then you're calling me a liar. So that is what they're doing to Yahweh. And it's why God has so much negative to say about this cult. But they are now all in on denying Dowd, when Dowd is the antidote for rabbinic Judaism, for Pauline Christianity. And this cult would have you believe that what we are saying is that you can substitute Dowd for Jesus. It's not true at all. In fact, not even remotely. The Christian New Testament is wrong from beginning to end. It is absolute utter trash. You can't just substitute the name David for Jesus and have something that is credible. It's the purpose of me writing the 5 volumes of Twistianity was to show that the Christian New Testament from beginning to end is absolute rubbish. The point that I have made is that Paul created the myth of Jesus through counterfeit and through identity theft in 52 CE. And the reason that he was able to promote this myth of an Iousu Christou is that it wasn't a complete lie. Complete lies are typically impossible to sell. And so the way that liars prevail is through what YAHOWAH refers to as babble, where you intermix and commingle truth and lies together to deceive so that your lie seems somewhat believable. And in Paul's case, it was known that there was someone who claimed to be the Son of God, someone who claimed to be the Messiah, someone who claimed to be King of Israel, who was in fact crucified on Passover, and who in fact, through his soul, took our guilt into Sheol on Matzah, and that he arrived exactly when he said he would to do exactly what he said he would do, and that was in year 3000 or 4000 Yah, which is 33 CE. And so all of that occurred, and there were many, many prophecies regarding it occurring. So what he did is he claimed that Dowd was dead and buried, so that all of the prophecies regarding all of this and what actually happened in 33 CE had to apply to his mythological Iousu Christou. So he just simply robbed Dowd of his titles and his achievements. And then he went beyond that, of course, in his creation of Iousu Christou, now known as Jesus Christ, because he did more than simply steal Dowd's titles, Son of God and King and Messiah, and his accomplishment being the one who fulfilled Passover by being crucified by the Romans in 33 CE. He then added a Dionysian flavor to it to make a religion out of this, and he made his Iousu Christou a god who died and was resurrected in the manner of Dionysus. And so he then added, a whole plethora of religious mantra to his gospel, and that was the result. So it seemed plausible to people who were ignorant, the Romans and the Greeks, who were his audience, because they didn't know what the Torah actually said. And unfortunately, those who did, the Jews, they were so into their religious beliefs that they had no room in their lives for YAHOWAH's beloved son Dowd, the return of the Messiah when he said he was going to return, or the actual fulfillment of Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym. They had no interest in it, and so they just passed it by. And since there was no rebuttal, Paul's lie prevailed and became the most popular religion in the world. So the recognition of who Dowd actually is and what he has achieved is the fulcrum upon which a soul pivots one way or another, either into Shamaim favorably and spending an eternity with God, dissipating into nothingness because they were misled, or being part of those who are now misleading, which earns an express ticket into Sheol. But Dowd is the one who demonstrated that the Torah, rather than condemning us, perfects us. It perfects the imperfect. Dowd had to be imperfect. So this whole idea of the Passover lamb has to be perfect. No, the Passover lamb has to take our guilt and be the substitute death for our guilt. It's all laid upon him. And the whole idea of Tamaim is just so misunderstood in the minds of the religious. For example, guess what? There is no such thing as a perfect animal. None, including humans, by the way. And so what God, by Tamim, is trying to express is that this animal is not demonstrably flawed, that if you're going to honor what Dowd did by becoming the Passover lamb, you don't take the worst of your flock and say, well, we'll sacrifice and eat that one. You don't do it that way. You look for the best that you have. And you offer the best that you have, because that's what God did. He offered the very best of us in Dowd. And that's the message. So Dowd demonstrated that clearly the Towrah perfects the imperfect so that we can become beloved sons and daughters of Yahowah. The sixth Mizmowr, then after that introduction begins, YAHOWAH, which is the proper pronunciation of God's one and only name as directed by his Torah teaching regarding our Chaya existence and our Shalom restoration. Yahowah, you consistently prove your case through me with pervasive arguments which vindicate me and acquit through me. Ata Yakash Ani. You use evidence and reason, engaging in rational dialogue with me, making decisions and resolving disputes through me, demonstrating that you and I are right. Was the Hiffle imperfect Joseph? Yah is continually enabling Dowd to engage in the process of rational discourse within the parameters of free will for our benefit, thereby eliminating everything displeasing and disagreeable. That is the whole purpose of the process. It's just explained so simply here that you just have to understand what the words say. Yahowah, God's one and only name. Not Yahweh, not Yahweh, not Jehovah, not Hashem, not Adonai, certainly not Jesus, not Mr. Christ. Yahowah. That is God's one and only name. You consistently prove your case through me, through Dowd, with pervasive arguments which vindicate me and acquit through me, thereby eliminating everything displeasing and disagreeable, devoid of antagonistic implications or frustrations. That is the beauty of it. You know, I spent some time, I don't know if it was yesterday, the day before yesterday. One of the books had some clean up on aisle 9 sort of stuff on it, and I was going through it, and I was thinking with the Moed. No, it was the Mikre series, volume 4 of YadaYahowah, and I wrote it before, in my last edit pass, of course, was it, before I fully appreciated the implications of what we have just read. To get to the point where you know, not just think it's possible, but you know that what we just read is true, that God eliminates everything displeasing and disagreeable through Dowd. And you recognize that the way that happened is the fulfillment of Pesach Matsah Bikuwrym, and particularly on Matzah, because Pesach adds to our days. It elongates our lives. It's the doorway to life. It's why Dowd is the Etz Chaim, the tree of lives in the garden. But it's Matzah where everything that is displeasing and disagreeable about us is removed, including anything that was flawed about Dowd. It's taken away because the whole process of fulfilling Matzah is explained in the 22nd Mizmowr, the 88th Mizmowr, and the 89th Mizmowr, and the 103rd Mizmowr, and Yeshaya, Isaiah 9 and 53. It's all laid out for us that God laid upon Dowd's nephesh soul the guilt, everything that was displeasing and disagreeable about us was placed on his soul as he carried it into Sheol, depositing it there in what's the equivalent of a black hole, never to be seen again. And that is why we are perfected as the benefit of the covenant on Matzah by Dowd's actions. And so I had to go back through one of these books and write out all references to the idea that the Ruach was doing something special here. And I came to that conclusion prior to knowing Dowd's fulfillment of Matzah, because I want to tell you, it took 24 years of really devoted study and research through the Torah, prophets, and Psalms before you finally recognize that this is God's message and that it's as they say, hidden in plain sight, and it's reinforced over and over again, and it's the way that it had to be. But prior to knowing that, you're saying, well, matzah is to unyeast our souls of the fungus of religion and politics, that which is particularly disagreeable and displeasing about our nature. And so trying to figure out, how did that happen? And if you don't understand that Dowd fulfilled matzah by taking our guilt into Sheol and depositing it there, then you're left with, well, okay, there's a reference to a fire. We're supposed to approach it on matzah, and the fire was written as Isha, which would be the feminine manifestation of fire. Maybe we can extract that into that the set-apart spirit, who is not mentioned, somehow plays a role in covering us, such that our sins are no longer seen because they're covered in light. But matzah is not about adding something like a garment of light. It's about taking away something, that which is displeasing and disagreeable, and taking it away and putting it into a place that's not light, but totally dark. It's not about covering over our guilt. It's about taking it away and eliminating it. So I had to go back in and make those corrections. I was at least given the opportunity to do so, which I appreciated. And it was amazing, too, that I had several times tried to delegate this. Some of the those listening, particularly Mariah, will know this. Rich also. I tried to delegate taking those references out of the books and correcting them for what Dowd had actually achieved. And as I went through this, and it only took a couple of hours with a couple of keyword searches to do it, and I should probably go back and do it with the other books as well. But the realization is I was not only wrong in trying to explain what happened on matzah, now that we know exactly what happened on matzah, but also trying to delegate that to someone else. It's something that I needed to clean up, and did the cleanup, as they say, on, well, that was, again, I guess would be aisle 4, but they'll be on other aisles along the way. Now, one of the things I do want to discuss here with me acknowledging that that I extrapolated early on, prior to knowing that Dowd fulfilled Chag Matzah. Even though Dowd made it very clear that he has done so, I should have seen it earlier. But to my credit, I'm the first person in human history to see it. So that part is good. At least first person in the last 2,500 years to be for certain. I'm obviously Dowd saw it, otherwise he wouldn't have volunteered to fulfill it. And I think YAHOWAH saw it, otherwise he wouldn't have written about it the way that he did. But the first person to put it all together and say, this is exactly what happened. And one of the things that dawned on me is, so Rich, what if, we were to go away from God's instruction for the moment? Because, God was very clear with me a year ago at this time, when he said, all right, the marginal utility of editing the books and writing another book is very small compared to the marginal utility of you now doing a blog and you speaking to my people. And so I went from a fellow that translated and wrote 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, to a person now who spends most of his time preparing for and delivering these programs. And one of the things that dawned on me is that while I had made a commitment to enhance the books over time, to refine them, to share what additional that we had learned, to even correct things that, like the Spirit's involvement and matzah, when the Spirit was involved, but not for us. The Spirit actually carried Dowd's nefesh into Sheol, protected Dowd's nefesh while he was in Sheol, and then released Dowd's nefesh from Sheol, which tells us a lot about the Ruach, which means that the Ruach cannot be Yahweh, but is instead the influence and the power of Yahweh, an implement of Yahweh, because otherwise it could not have gone into Sheol with Dowd. But since we're told the Spirit never left Dowd, that is a requirement. So when I recognized, that there's not only that realization, but there's just so many more that are things that we have learned, particularly over the last 6 months, that if we were to go back now and say, let's do another edit pass through the books, 35 of them, 25,000 pages. And let's say that we worked at faster than anyone has ever worked in terms of doing an edit of all of the new things that we have learned, and weaving them through these books and citing the evidence for them. And we made just enormous pace at 10 minutes a page. Well, 10 minutes a page is 6 pages per hour. So if you want to do the math, if I were to take half of my time, I work 80 hours a week at this. If I were to take half of my time, 40 hours a week, just to do another edit pass through the books, which, by the way, are absolutely overwhelmingly good enough to direct any soul to Yahweh. But if I were to refine them, you know how much time it would take? It's 104 weeks. It's 2 full years of 40 hours a week to achieve that result. So I think what we're going to do is what Yahweh said. Let's look the camera in the eye. Let's speak directly to the world, to Goyim and to Yehudim, and share what we are learning in real time, because that is the joy of these programs, is that so much of what I'm sharing with you is something that I've come to understand quite recently, and we're developing our foundation of understanding literally in real time. After 24 years of building the foundation, now we're watching this picture that God has presented for us, beautifully framed now, and all of the contours and details are just becoming so evident to us that it is a marvelous experience to be able to share these thoughts with you in real time. And I think what you're noticing here is that this isn't scripted. This is all very much extemporaneous. We sit down. These are all live streams. There is no prior programming. Rich and I don't say, okay, Rich, what do you think we ought to cover today? Let's coordinate our notes. The only thing Rich will do is if we are making a presentation from a particular address within the Torah, prophets, or Psalms, he will have taken a picture of where we were in that particular studio at the conclusion of our last program, so that if we're, I don't like to cite Yahweh's testimony just off of the top of my head. I've spent a lot of time developing these translations. They're all my own, and even the style of the Amplified translations, and they're from the oldest extant sources, the Dead Sea Scrolls, when they contradict the Masoretic text, are different than the Masoretic text, and scrubbed of all the diacritical religious markings of the Masoretes, the rabbis. I want to build it to you. I mean, I'll share even some of my commentary, because that commentary was very thoughtful. I'm studying this. I'm thinking about all these other things. You're putting it into words that are very much germane to that topic. But still, the majority of every program is extemporaneous. And so about the only thing that Rich and I will coordinate is we'll say, hey, Rich, it's a beautiful morning. Welcome back. Rich gets the big buck, so he comes here early in the day. Somebody that accused Rich of of being paid for doing this. Yeah, he is paid, but he is. Yes, yeah, we're all being compensated by YAHOWAH, not monetarily, but in all other ways that that matter. Rich is far and away the most generous person who I have met relative to the covenant in terms of he's taking his life savings and he is investing significantly to make this YAHOWAH vlog better. To accuse him otherwise, as someone did this morning, is a real shame. It's interesting, of course, the person that is accusing him of being paid stole $20,000 from my wife and I on false pretenses, and then thanked us for it by trashing us. So yeah, you can take that with a grain of salt if you wish. But we will have a discussion. Say, where do you want to begin today? And we'll look outside and say, it's really a pretty day. Let's do one outside. Say, yeah, it is gorgeous. Let's do one outside. And this evening we'll return to our series on returning to the garden. And so that's the kind of discussion we have on it. And we just go and we trust one another to be ready to present these live streams, which are actually very complicated to produce, and the investment in equipment to do this well is exceptional. So here we have a statement from YAHOWAH that I dearly love, because when it's properly understood and translated, it explains exactly what we've come to understand. I think it is the single greatest discovery in human history. It not only solves the worst crime ever perpetrated by man, that is robbing Dowd of his dignity, of his titles and his achievements to create the myth of Jesus Christ, who never actually existed, and then to rob Jews of their inheritance, which is also part of Christianity. We solved that crime. And at the same time, we have proclaimed the truth about how YAHOWAH and Dowd, father and son, work together to perfect us, to acquit us through their effort together. And that is how the sixth Mizmowr, or psalm, opens. YAHOWAH, God's one and only name, you consistently prove your case through me with pervasive arguments which vindicate me and acquit through me, thereby eliminating everything which is displeasing and disagreeable. I would post that anywhere and stand behind it and say that is one of the most profoundly important truths ever written. Your instructions enable me to be correct. Ata Yashar Ani, your willingness to improve me, to teach me, to guide me, to train me, even to provide discipline for me, make me stronger, strengthening me. Peel, imperfect, Jusive, it's an expression of God's desire to do this through Dowd, imperfect, with ongoing implications. The Peel means that the subject, me, Dowd, has the benefit of what YAHOWAH is achieving through Yahtzar. And this is so important for people to appreciate. You see, in the garden, the reason that YAHOWAH caused the fall of man, and it wasn't Eve didn't even exist. It wasn't Towrah, the actual name of the woman, who caused the fall of man. And it wasn't even man's responsibility for causing the fall of man. YAHOWAH caused the fall of man, made it very clear, used the verb in the fall, and to describe that he caused the fall of man. He did so because Adam was not ready. He was not ready to be of interest to YAHOWAH, was not engaged doing the work that was required to make the universe better, make the garden better then, and the planet better, and then the universe better. He showed no indication he could be trusted. He was a lousy listener. He was not responsive to God. And so everything about Dowd was just a boring and of no value to YAHOWAH. Might as well be looking at a goldfish swimming around in a bowl. And so Dowd is the opposite of that. He's interesting. He is a guy that is willing to work. He wants to be improved. He wants to be taught. And the whole idea of teaching is that, I don't know about you, but I went to kindergarten, then went first grade through sixth grade. We called that grammar school back in the day. And then we had a thing called junior high. I don't think they call that junior high anymore. Maybe middle school or whatever they call it now. And then they have upper school. But we had junior high and high school, and then I went to college, and then I got a PhD in and writing 35 dissertations about YAHOWAH, and pushing the threshold of human understanding way beyond where it had ever been before. So in that process, when I was in kindergarten, first and second grade, we did not do calculus. There were no lessons on algebra in first grade. I did not write essays in kindergarten. I love science, but there was no class on biology or physics in first grade. You start at the basics. Yeah, you lay a foundation. If you're going to teach someone, you have to teach them the basics, and then you learn from that. So you start with language, and then you build on top of layer and layer and layer to the point that you can go from, well, addition and subtraction to multiplication and division to things like geometry, and applying those concepts that you've learned in geometry, and then in algebra, and then algebra to trigonometry, and to calculus, and then into the concepts of probability and statistical analysis. And you build this reservoir of knowledge, which then properly processed can lead to understanding if you're taught the discipline of logic and of reason, of rhetoric, the skills of debate, and what are fallacies versus what is provable by evidence and reason. And that was my discipline growing up. And then but that was just an academic education. That does not prepare anybody for much of anything. I'm here to tell you, listen, I did my thing. I'm glad I did my thing. But that is not preparation for life. You're still, at that point, you have paid for your education. You have created zip of value. Nothing. You have not made the world one iota better by capitalizing on the education that somebody else has provided for you. In fact, at that point, you're still the parasite. And until you can pull yourself to the point free of that, to the point you can then make a contribution. I started in business. I wasn't very good at it. I think I've shared that my first year at about 25 cents an hour, worked damn near 100 hours a week, which might have gotten to, survivable income. But, I was terrible at it. I was trying to do I think the hardest job in the world, sell things. And I was just really crappy at it. And so the second year, decided, well, I'd like to be a success. And so I'm going to have to figure out a way that I can use my skills. And my skills were up here primarily. I didn't have the great personality. I don't guess I've never had a great personality, but I was smarter than the average lizard out there. And so I used my noggin to conceive a way that I could succeed in sales without ever having to sell. And it was so insightful that if you talk to people and find out what they want and need, and you figure out a way to give them what they want and need, it means that you have to listen to them. You have to genuinely care about them. You have to then process what they have said, and then you have to figure out a way to determine if the difference between what they want, what they need, what's good for them, and how to deliver it to them in the proper way, because if you do that, you don't have to sell them anything. You're offering them what they already want. I came up with this approach, and made millions back in the time when millions were actually real money. And then parlayed that into company after company, and I built things. I hired people. I conceived new ideas. I went after them, approached them, and built. And that's the kind of thing that YAHOWAH is looking for. And I recognize that in that whole process of starting and building companies is that every day you're faced with tremendous challenges. You really have to be devoted to the cause. You have to invest your own money to make payroll. You're the last person that gets paid. You're responsible for everything. And yet you need to be able to delegate. Otherwise, you can't make a meaningful contribution. And then you have to figure out a way to share credit. And recognize that when you share credit and you praise people, they will very often do what I've seen so many people do. And that means that they will figure out a way to turn on you. And they will use what you have said positively about them against you. And so it is this constant building up and then being torn down, and making 100 right decisions in a day, and having the one that wasn't as good as it maybe could have been or should have been bite you. And how you have to recover from that. It's this discipline. It gives you grit, backbone, stamina, resilience. It builds a sense of character and confidence. The only way you know that you can prevail when times get tough is to have gone through tough times and to have prevailed. This is what God is looking for from us. It's the thing that Adam did not have. It's the thing that Dowd had. It is what made Dowd so special. He was a builder. And so God recognized, and here's Dowd speaking to God. It says, your instructions enable me to be correct. Your willingness is to improve me, which means that he didn't start perfect. He didn't start knowing it all. He was taught and he improved. He was guided and he was trained. God provided discipline, which made Dowd stronger. It's a tiny little thing, but many of you know, because I posted it, that in the last week, I have been troubled by a painful back. And never once in this process did I say, God, could you just please make the pain go away so I can be productive? No. What you have to do is to show that, you're capable of dealing with adversity, that pain is not something that's going to keep you down, that you can do this. And it's been difficult to breathe in deeply enough to do this program because, well, you can't speak into a microphone unless you have air that goes across your vocal cords. And when you're sitting down at and having that kind of compression and this pain that's where the muscles contract around it and create that whole it's just agonizing. It's like knives being in you can't breathe deeply enough to project on a program like this. And I thought that wincing and pain might be inappropriate. But it's not like I gave up those days. I spent almost all of that time. I think the entire time I took 4 or 5 hours off my normal schedule, where I just had to lay down on a hard surface and let everything chill out a bit. But other than that, I was translating. I was working on Bashar Herald Volume 4, and here we are back at it. We may limit our evening program to an hour tonight as opposed to 2, so that I'm able to be functional as well tomorrow. But this is the kind of stuff that YAHOWAH is looking for. When we had this group of former insiders that turned into complete malcontent dunderheads and decided that they would trash everything that they had once supported. The proper answer is not to say, have them just go away, they're an irritant. No, It's to plow right through, to continue the course, expose and condemn as God shows the way to do that, based upon His prophetic instructions. But keep right on going. Look at Moshe. Boy, he had to do it, didn't he? Look at Dowd. He really had to do it, didn't he? Both of them encountered inside rebellions, and painful ones, but they had to demonstrate that they could endure even through it. And this is what God wants of us. So your instructions enable me to be correct. A willingness to improve me, to teach me, to guide me, to train me, to discipline me, to make me stronger. All of these things are so powerful. And you are never overly protective or antagonistic. God, I love this. And it's a celebration of everything that Dowd represents. It's a celebration of the thing that I did not understand about the garden until quite recently. Yahweh was overprotective in the garden. There was no outside stimuli. Adam had no incentive to work. He had no grit. He didn't have to overcome any challenge with all the food he could possibly want. He had this, finally had the company of a lovely woman. He never was cold, never was hot, never was bothered, never stumbled, never fell and had to get up. He was coddled. It was a protective and walled, sheltered garden. And so in that environment, he was never tested. He was never tried. He never failed and had to show some resolve. And he was a deadbeat. He just didn't work. He made no contribution. His primary purpose was to work and to be observant, and he was neither of the two. And so I realized for the first time why God caused the fall of man, because in that garden, he was overly protected, which means man had to be released from the garden. And it took us 6,000 years for us to finally develop the fervor, the passion, the enthusiasm to get it right. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration. It took us 3,000 years because Dowd did. Dowd did all of these things. It took us another 3,000 years, of course, after Dowd to be able to explain what I'm explaining to you right now. So what God says is you're not overly protective and you're not antagonistic. You're not displeased and all emotionally worked up. You're neither toxic nor venomous. And this is important here. Listen, we know, because Dowd's life is an open book to us, we know that Dowd messed up bunches of times. I mean, bunches of times. And Yahweh only got really frustrated with him a couple of times. One is, Dowd had made some bad choices, and God said, "Well, I'll tell you what, we'll work this through. I'm going to give you three options here." And Dowd chose the worst of the three options, and you could tell that God says, "Come on, man, I want to teach you a lesson here, but this is getting to be painful. You really need to man up here." And this is when the option he should have chosen was to continually be pursued and antagonized, really, by Israel. It's what Moshe ultimately had to man up and endure. It's what I am enduring now. You have to, at some point, be willing to say, "Yeah, bring it on." I trust our relationship to the point that you can bring it on, and we will prevail. I'm not going to quit, no matter how disagreeable this is. I'm going to trust you to get us through it. And I'm going to work with you every moment of the way. And Dowd had his issue. And then one time he sent an extraordinarily good man off to fight a battle that he thought he would die in so that he could take his wife. And Yahweh had a timeout with Dowd for having done so. It wasn't the fact that it was Dowd's eighth wife, or that 18th, if you consider his other sexual partners. 17 was certainly fine with YAHOWAH. 18 would have been fine with YAHOWAH too. Tells you that YAHOWAH's not into monogamy, doesn't it? This one one wife, one husband thing. Yeah, it's not God's thing. Monogamy is not God's thing unless it's unless it's with him. He doesn't share with false gods. But when Dowd did that, there was a timeout, not because it was the 18th in his group of women that he enjoyed their company, but because of the way he went about forming this relationship with her. So these are God saying, I'm going to let you fall. I'm not going to keep you from making mistakes, because it is by making a mistake and recovering from it that you show that you're trustworthy. You heard that correctly? It is by making a mistake and correcting your mistake and growing from it that you show that you're trustworthy. Now, that did not mean that when Dowd made a mistake, like, for example, he made when he got mad at God for killing the man turned woman. First transgender story is actually in 2 Samuel 6, who interfered with the transport of the Ark of the Covenant and the bull's work to get it to the proper position. When Dowd got all upset with YAHOWAH for having killed the man turned woman who interfered in this way, God did not become antagonistic. And he certainly wasn't protective of Dowd in the sense of he allowed Dowd to stew. He allowed Dowd to make the mistake, but he then gave Dowd the time, and he came to Dowd with the answer. And what's interesting is that while the answer is there, which was Obed-Edom is going to, who is the man from Edom, is going to take care of the repositioning of the ark so that you can celebrate as the high priest on Yom Kippurim when you come back. And by the way, the rest of you, after wearing the ephod of the high priest, can be naked, because we are going back to the garden. That is exactly what's going to happen in year 6,000 Yah in 2033. What you don't find is Dowd going back and say, well, then I need to rewrite my narrative, and I want to rewrite maybe one of my Mizmowr to convey my mistake and then correct it. No. Recognized what was true and moved on. That's something also to keep in mind, and it's also something that guides what we're currently doing, is that Dowd wrote his Mizmowr with what he knew at the time. I am certain that he came to know more the more that he was with YAHOWAH, but it wasn't appropriate to go back and change the others. They were right. They just weren't as completely right as what he would learn over time. This is all part of the process. God cannot be overly protective. He cannot create an environment where we cannot fall. He has to let us fall. It's like every parent. Eventually, you have to let your child stumble. You have to let them experience failure. And then you have to support them in such a way that they understand how important it is to get back up, dust yourself off, and go again, but cognizant of what you learned so that you grow. So this is Mizmowr lyrics to sing Psalm 6:1. Probably gone very close to an hour now, and we've covered one statement. He's got two fingers held up. 2 minutes shy of an hour, and we've done our normal thing. We've almost finished our analysis of Mizmowr Psalm 6:1. Although I did want to share some concluding thoughts with you on it, which is the realization that YAHOWAH helps us become right with him so that he can vindicate us. It serves as a rebuke of religion, because this is the whole process we're going through. And this affirmation is irrefutably and undeniably established through Dowd's life and through his lyrics. He is the antidote for false perceptions that are contained in the Talmud and the New Testament. By closely examining and carefully considering the Torah, by listening to the revelations that YAHOWAH conveyed to the prophet Shamuel, Dowd came to know and trust YAHOWAH. A highly imperfect man was completely vindicated. My my, my Leah has got her little Cara, and there well, there we are. Hello there, Cara. This is an imperfect dog that is as sweet as they could possibly be. She does like beards, however. She is quite the kisser, as you can also see. She is a sweetheart. This is Cara. She is a student also of the Towrah because she gets doggy daycare, which means that all three dogs, Asher, yeah, thank you for the ear kisses, Asher, Wookie, and Cara, all get to sit around me for hours each day as we translate and share. And I very often read what I have written out loud because that's really the best way to process it, to come first to own the material, but to hear how it sounds to the ear. And so she is very accustomed to this. And then in the evening, we will play these programs to listen to what we have conveyed. And she is a very good listener. So, Cara, that is all very good thing. No. So this is Cara, and with Cara on top of the table, Wookie and Asher are both jealous and now want and now
to tell you it's time for lunch.
Okay, attention. And we have finished our first hour. So as soon as we finish this quick review, we'll be with you. So it's a family program, and this is the way we do it, and it's the way that we're going to continue to do it. And I have been informed by YAHOWAH that my retirement from doing this, and also the team that is working with me, that our retirement will come in 1,008 years from now. And then we're officially retired, and just to get to enjoy the benefits of this. But we'll be working for this next 8 years, and then we will work for 1,000 years thereafter, as this final remnant is brought back into the garden, and we instill lots of Dowd in them, a sense of work ethic, a sense of a desire to learn and to grow and to be able to fall and get up and make another fresh start, having learned something from the last mistake, to be an imperfect individual who is interesting. In fact, this is one of the things that it's just so obvious to me, is that if we were perfect, let's just say that we want to take the religious concept of perfect, God's perfect, that religious concept of perfect, and we were all perfect, well, there would be only one paradigm of perfect. That'd be God. And so God's eternity, if we're all going to be perfect, would be to be surrounded by all little me's, many me's.
Boring.
Oh my God, would that be boring? It's the things that make us interesting are the things like Dowd, where God said, I like this guy. This is my idea of a great guy. He was interesting. He just had so much personality. And so God's not looking for clones. He's looking for interesting. Eternity is a long time. He wants people who he knows he can trust, who he can rely upon, who he can teach, who will listen, who want to grow, who he can share eternity with, and trust that they're going to do the right thing when given the opportunity. And if we make a mistake, we learn from it and go from there. This is what God is looking for. So this whole religious nonsense about perfection is just not understanding the word. I like it actually as a verb, where the purpose of the second benefit, really, of the covenant, it's a condition of the covenant and then a benefit of the covenant, is walk to God and allow him to perfect us. And when you're dealing with perfect as a verb, that I see it as refine, improve, knock off some of the rough edges here and there, allow us to grow and achieve some confidence along the way. I like the idea of being perfected. I just don't like the idea of being perfect. I don't think God does either. I don't think it's realistic, and I don't think it's even desirable. But being perfected absolutely is, and Dowd is the epitome of this. So this is a marvelous, marvelous, I mean, just tremendous affirmation of everything we have come to know and share. And here it is, so brilliantly presented. And the opening line of the sixth, the number of man, Mizmowr, of God's beloved Son, the Dowd, our Savior, our King, the Messiah, the man who is not only the exemplar of Yisrael and the exemplar of the covenant, but the man who made it all possible for us to share in everything that God is offering. So thank you for listening. I know I talked a lot here and talked probably too fast at times. There were just so many things I wanted to share because this message resonates with me. It is one of those that I celebrate, and I'm so thankful for YAHOWAH for sharing it with us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Hope to see you this evening as we do Family Hour. That will be at, I guess that's 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 6 o'clock Atlantic Time here in the beautiful Caribbean Sea. But it'll be 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time this evening. We will do Family Hour with the normal cast of characters and look forward to seeing you there as we continue with our series, Return to the Garden. Good day.